I'm Robert Ferguson. I'm going to be doing a wiring demonstration of an Italian electric blade for UAF. It's important to remember I am doing a French tip with a French wire. The tools you're going to need to do this, starting with your Italian blade. You will also need an Italian electric bell guard and socket combination. You will need some sort of marking device. I am using blue tape. You will need a rat tail metal file. You will, of course, need your grip. You will, in the long run, need your Italian pummel. You will need a second pummel with a hole through the base of it. You will need your wire, French wire. You will need your barrel, French barrel. You will need your spaghetti tubing. You will need a felt pad. You will need a piece of string or cordage, lightweight, about 36 inches long, based on what weapon you're wiring. You will need liquid superglue and gel superglue. You will need a small piece of wire. This is picture frame hanging wire. You will need vice grips, preferably 2 pairs, or vice grips and pliers. The first step to doing all this is preparing your bell guard. To prepare the bell guard, when it comes to you from whoever you order it from, this one happens to come from thefencingpost.com. Saul happens to be the best arms merchant out there. It will look just like that, jelly bean shaped. What you're going to do is take your rat tail file and file a gap in the top of the bell guard, the top, towards the socket, so that the wires will not get pinched and cut. It's a simple process. Set it on something firm, start a notch, file away, and we'll cut back when I'm done. This takes about a minute. I finished filing out the bell guard. Now if you're doing any other of the weapons, you'll have to do the bell guard and the socket separately because they won't be welded together. Notice that the socket now has a gap big enough to actually run the wires through. You should attack it from both the front and the back to make sure that it's not filed at an uneven angle. The next step to this, slide your bell guard onto your weapon so that the ricasso sticks out, the false section of the blade. You need to know how far back the wire can come into the wire groove so that you don't over superglue. This is where your marking device comes in. At the front of your bell guard, make a mark with a permanent marker or put your piece of tape or whatever you're going to use to signal that you should stop gluing there. Not real important that it's straight. Once the tape is on, you can remove your bell guard off the blade again. This one may need some filing because it's sticking a bit, but whatever. Next, take your wire. You're going to have to untwist the wire carefully because when they come from the factory, they're twisted in a figure 8. To untangle the wire, find both ends, slightly straighten it, and then from the top, straighten all the way to the base without kinking your wire. If it starts to kink like this one is, you have to untangle it gently and then continue down to the base. You'll run your fingers down your wire probably 2 or 3 times just to make sure all the kinks are out. The next step, take the base end away from your cap, feed it in from the top of your barrel. Pull it down until the cap is just inside your barrel. It still sticks out a little bit. Okay, we're back. Mine had a little bit of super glue up here in the threads by the tip. You have to make sure that the entire channel for the wire is cleared. Then set the wire into the channel a little bit and slowly work your tip on you may have to pull the wire a little bit while you thread it on there. You want it snug enough that it's not going to come loose with standard blade contacts. So, making sure you miss the wire, attack it from the sides, attach your vice grips beneath it, take your second pair of vice grips or needle nose pliers, and make sure it is snug. Not too terribly tight, but snug. The next step is where if you have a punch set comes in handy. You can do it without a punch set. You probably should do it with a punch set if you don't know what you're doing. But if you have a small enough file, you can push your cap all the way in. With epes, you can just pull it straight down. But I'm going to use a file as a punch set. Firm pressure, don't push too hard, otherwise you will crack the plastic on your cap. And then you've just destroyed the entire wire. Now, take your thin piece of wire, feed it through the two holes in your barrel. Make a loop. Pigtail it well, because it's going to have to hold some pressure here in a minute. You can use any sort of wire that's thick enough. You can also use bread twisty ties, but I find you need to double those up. Next, your pommel with the hole in it. Attach your pommel. Keep in mind, if you're doing a pistol grip or if you're using a French or an Italian and you have a shorter hand, you will also need an outside 6mm hex. You will screw it on before you cut the tang and then screw it down to repair the threads of your tang. Otherwise, you'll need to go buy a tap and die set. The next step, you will end up untying the knot that's already in it, if you care. Threading one end through your hole, tying a knot with it. Doesn't matter what knot you use as long as you can untie it later. I'm partial to the Bollins, but you can tie whatever you personally want as long as it does not slip. As long as you tie it right side up. Take the other end and it goes through your loop that you just made. Make sure that the pig-tied side is not where you're putting your rope through. Then bend the blade generally away from yourself so that when you lose it, further than you plan to ever hit another fencer. If you don't bend it far enough and you ever bend the blade in a fencing bout or a tournament, you will break your wire in the trough. Here it comes in handy to tie a taut line hitch. You go down to the base, come up above it, going through twice, and then going above it, which is now below it, once. And this is a taut line hitch. This will allow you to tighten or loosen where you are with your blade and its bend. It's easier to loosen than it is to tighten though, so be aware of this fact. Now, later on when it comes time to untie this, make sure that you have either a second pair of hands to help you, or once you get it started untying, you transfer to the tip and point of the weapon so that it doesn't come bouncing into your own face or someone else's face. Okay. If you have two people, you cannot untie the knot there and just re-tighten it down. But since I'm doing this with one set of hands, I will continue to do it with one set of hands. If you make a lot of blades of the same type, if you're doing, say, pistol grips and you're doing a bunch of them for yourself, you can replace this knot with a simple fishing swivel that you can just lock onto this other knot down here. and it makes your life a little bit easier. If you find that your cordage is too slick and too small and it starts to give way on its own, throw another hitch above it. This is called the locking hitch, and just pull it snug.